Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. We have our first presentation with TriStar Gold, which trades on the TSXV under the ticker TSG. As always, this presentation will contain forward-looking statements. If you'd like to know more about those, you can check them out on the company's website where their presentation is, which has been recently updated, so check that out. And as always, this will contain a Q&A section, so feel free to input your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce my colleague Magda and CEO of TriStar Gold, Nick Appleyard. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me here today, Deborah.
Yeah, really excited to hear about what's going on in Brazil. Maybe since it's your first webinar with us, you could start with a little bit of an intro of yourself and the company as well, and then we'll dig into what's new.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah. So I've been running TriStar for about 7 years now. Originally a geo from Australia, but before this, I've been working in Latin America and around Latin America for over 20 years now, and focused on developing assets that get turned into mines. So that's sort of my niche, I guess, in the industry, taking someone's discovery, turning it into a business plan and getting it ready for production, which is exactly what we plan to do here with TriStar. Okay, as Deborah mentioned, I will be trying to give you some guidance looking forward. So there are some forward-looking statements, which, we're giving you our best guidance we have, but there's no guarantees. So, we have a single asset. It's called Castelo de Sonhos in central Brazil in the southern portion of Pará State. This is probably the main mine jurisdiction within Brazil these days. It's a fantastic jurisdiction for mining. It's sort of like Nevada or Western Australia. It's a big, broad, open place, sort of very rich mineral endowment and a very strong administrative authorities in mining who are very knowledgeable and want to get it done properly. So it's a good place to be. And that's why we see people like G Mining, Sarabi, Other Minerals, Vale are all in and around us. So we're in the right place. We've got a good project. We've got a good experienced team. We've just strengthened that team with the addition of Marcus Brewster recently as the Chief Operating Officer. He comes from a background of operating this type of PaleoPlacer deposit, mainly in West Africa, but he's also got Brazilian experience as well. We've also been strengthening our board into more of a development board away from the exploration style, with people like Mark Isto, Eric Zanschab joining us recently. So we've got all of the experience we need on the board. And currently we've completed a pre-feasibility study for a significantly large deposit, 1.4 million ounces in reserves now, and we are 100% focused on permitting and getting this forward towards a production decision. So I mentioned the management team is appropriate and strong, and as I said in my little intro there, my background and the team I brought in 7 years ago, our job was to, a strength or niche in the industry is to take a discovery and bring it forward to a production decision, get it through feasibility study, get it into permitting. And we've got the team to do that, and we've done that, and it's been hugely successful. So now we're starting to bring in the next team, which is, obviously going to be led by Marcus, who has an operating background in PaleoPlacers. So he has run resources and reserves for goldfields at Tarkwa and Damang. He ended up being, through many senior, many increasingly senior roles there, ended up as general manager at Damang. Fantastically for us, he also speaks Portuguese. So I couldn't think of a better chief operating officer to be in charge of this project as it sort of moves on into the next phase here. Obviously with Scott, Fabio, Andrew, we still have that strength in finance, exploration, and sustainability, ESG, permitting, which is Andrew's strength. Board of directors has been evolving as well. It's really nice to sort of point out people like Mark Isto, Carlos Villeneuve, Eric Janschau, Rod, Jessica, all people who are sort of top in their field and very serious about running a company. It's very serious about advancing a proper mining company, doing things correctly and doing things, the way a good corporate neighbor should behave and should act. So this is a board I'm proud to be associated with, and I'm very happy that they, have accepted positions and the offer to be on our board of directors. So it's a good board for us moving forward here. I touched briefly then when I talked about the board and the staff on the ESG. It's a bigger issue these days, as it should be for all of us. With this new board, we now have a committee of the board who are putting in place standards, the principles that we're going to work towards, the policies that management need to apply, right down to the field staff, and make sure that what the field staff are doing on a day-to-day basis is reflected, is a reflection of what the board wants to do and how the board wants this company to behave. And so that's all in place. And I think the really nice thing about this is we're taking this very seriously. It gets talked about a lot. We've got a VP of sustainability now. But on the ground, not too much has changed. The guys, we're already being a good corporate citizen. I think there's more disclosure, more reporting of it now. But the actual work we were doing was already good. So I'm sort of proud of the staff and the people we have on the ground for doing that already. So the project we have is called Castelo de Sonhos, Castle of Dreams. It's about 18,000 hectares, 17,000 hectares. We have a large resource on it now. It's grown to 1.8 million ounces, about 700,000 ounces of inferred resources. We've only been drilling shallow holes, mainly 120 meters, a few a little bit deeper. So we've got some resources down to close to 150 meters. But it's it's a lot. It's very open still. It's very similar to some other mines around the world, particularly Tarkwa and to Jacobina. Tarkwa is a goldfields mine in Ghana. Jacobina is a Yamana mine in Brazil. Both highly successful, highly profitable mines. And how that helps us is when we can learn from those mines. We don't have to go through the full learning curve. We start from where they've got to today and move forward from there. So we're now advancing towards a construction decision. That's our goal, where our sights are set. We completed a pre-feasibility study at the end of 2021. Really good results. Post-tax IRR, 28% and 320 million NPV. We've attracted investments from groups like Royal Gold, from Oromet, serious groups who look at an asset and go, this one looks like it's moving forward to mining and it's going to be something important, and let's get a toe in the door, so to speak. And with those investments from those serious groups, we're now advancing towards permitting. So we applied for our prior license in July 2022, and the guidance we've received is that it should take 12 to 15 months. So Q3 of this year is what we're guiding people on our anticipated receipt of that prior license. From the pre-feasibility study, the overwhelming word that comes out is simple. It's simple open pit mining. The metallurgy is the easiest I've ever seen in my too long career now. 98% gold recovery is unheard of generally, but it's real. I mean, Tarkwa has 97.5%, I think. So, it's not like we're shooting for the stars here. It's being achieved everywhere else on these deposits. And just because of that simplicity, that cleanliness of the ore, it's environmentally clean as well, which really helps our ESG side. And then on top of that, this project is still very early in its life cycle as a mine. So I think there's a lot of discovery, a lot of exploration still to do beyond these 11 years of life that we proved up in the PFS. So I said it's a PaleoPlacer. Most people haven't come across PaleoPlacers much, knowingly anyway. I think the statistic is something like 40% of all the world's gold has come out of PaleoPlacers. But most of that is from Witwatersrand in South Africa, which is probably a distinct beast that we want to put aside. It's massive beyond belief in a lot of ways. But really what we're looking at here is, you can see in this image, it's a big alluvial fan. An alluvial fan like that, probably larger than that, that was weathering away a primary gold deposit about 2 billion years ago. And then that just gets buried, metamorphosed, and then in time comes back to the surface and we find it. So that's really what we're looking at. So you can imagine sands, channels, banks, exactly what we're looking at here at Castelo de Sonhos. So that was what a PaleoPlacer is. Now, why would we want to look for PaleoPlacers and why do we like them? Well, as I mentioned, most people haven't heard of them, but they've produced massive amounts of gold. So they're generally very, very big, which allows for large tonnage. They have very good continuity because really there's one force at work and it's gravity. So if you believe in gravity, you believe in the PaleoPlacers. If you don't believe in gravity, well, that's a scary thought, I guess. But, they are simple. And it is just gravity and hydrology, just water running downstream. So they become very amenable to selective mining because we can see the grain size, we can see where the reefs are, where the conglomerates are, we can see where the fine-grained sediments are, which probably host less gold. So you can selectively mine it. And as I mentioned earlier, metallurgically very, very clean. We have no sulfides in this deposit. We have no mercury, no arsenic, no copper, nothing deleterious at all. It's really a sand and gold. So it's high recoveries, very, very clean, and low reagent costs. So the development, milestones that we've just had recently, and probably most importantly, what's coming up. We obviously had Royal Gold come in 2019, fund our pre-feasibility study, completed that in 2021 with, as expected, some great results. And then Oromet came in last year, and now we've moved into permitting. And as I said, July 2022, we submitted for the prior license, which is effectively the approval of our EIA, saying, yes, at this site, this mine will work and it'll work well. So that's in, and we're looking to receive this permit in Q3 of this year. And then obviously in parallel with that, we'll start to advance the final feasibility study. And we're already doing the work for the operating permit, which also the installation permit, which is the one you need just to build the mine. So there's a lot going on, but that big milestone is Q3 this year, getting that permit to say, yes, this mine works in this location. And then you've got, multi-million ounce deposit with a permit in a great mining location. So I'll just, before we get on to this one, I wonder if there's any questions at this point.
So Nick, you have a couple before we keep going. Going back to leadership, can you kind of briefly talk about the past successes of TriStar's management and board kind of leading up? Okay,
yeah. So as I said, when I've been here about 7 years now, and the team I brought in, our niche, as I said, is taking from discovery through to a production decision. We've done it multiple times before. We did it with the Gemfield deposit in Nevada, which is in construction now. I forget who actually, but again, we did the feasibility study, we did scoping study, feasibility study, got into permitting, and sold it to someone who was going to put it into production. Prior to that was the Immaculata mine in Peru, and before that, the Pallancata mine in Peru. So this is sort of the fourth iteration now of taking a discovery, which I think the team has the strength to recognize as a strong discovery, take it through, do the studies, and do the work that's required to get it to a production decision. So that's been done multiple times now on, Gemfield, Pallancata, Immaculata, and Pallancata and Immaculata are the core assets of Hochschild mining now. So they're major mines. So we've had that history of doing that before as a management team. And now, as we said, we've added Marcus, who's, run these big mines in the past. From the board of directors, obviously there's so much success there. It's hard to put into a short sentences, but Mark Isto's been, I think, mine manager for Placer in the past, and obviously COO of Royal Gold, gets a review of everything that's going on in the industry, as did Eric Zanschow, who became the head analyst at Canaccord. So there's I shouldn't forget Mark Jones, who started TriStar, had a history of success in finding assets, developing them, selling them on, and turning them into mines. I think G Mining are now in the construction on Tocantinzinho, which was an old asset of Mark's, and he made money for his shareholders with. So there's a whole history of developing the assets and getting them into production.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot of experience in the company. Yeah. So now, kind of switching over to permitting, can you kind of tell us a little bit about the permitting process in Brazil, kind of the permits required and the steps to get them, and where TriStar is within this kind of greater process? Yeah,
so like every jurisdiction, if you look at all the minor permits, there's probably 40 or 50 or 60, I think. It's probably very equivalent to when I was permitting in Nevada. I think we had 70 odd permits to get, but really you break it down into a few major ones. In Brazil, there's the prior license, which is approval of the EIA, say, yes, this mine works in this location. The installation license, which is, I consider sort of more of an engineering one. It's like, okay, this is how we're going to build it. This is how we're going to get it into construction. So that's that. Once you've applied, once you had the prior license, have said this project works, you get some engineering plans and you say, this is how we're going to build it. Then they approve that. And then you when you've built it, you get your operating license, which is the third big permit, which is more of a formality. You just go, yes, we built what we said we we're going to build, and then they give you permission to start operating it. So we're in that. What we have done, obviously, like probably most people, we're trying to learn from everything else around us. So even though we're in the prior license stage, we are doing work for the next stage as well, that engineering license. We know some of the requirements for that are going to be, that we're going to have to comply with. So we're already doing that work. We've already got those contracts in place, and we've got consultants working on certain aspects that we know will be required. So we're already thinking that one step ahead, and that's a much quicker license to get. So the other big steps for us, obviously, to get the prior license are a site visit and inspection from the authorities, which is expected in March, and then a public hearing, which is expected in the local town. We have to have a meeting, to discuss with all the local interested people, and that'll be probably early June, and then shortly after that, feedback from that goes into the final application or final approval. So, we're working on all of those aspects now.
Yeah. And then we have a follow-up audience question. What additional permits will be required after receiving the EIA?
That's really it. I mean, if we're getting the LP, the prior license, the big ones are the installation license and then the operating license. So it's really, they get simpler as you go further into it. This is the hardest one to get, the most work, because you've got a full EIA and an REIA, which is the social side of it. So it's all of the social, all the environmental side is all in reports, which are several thousand pages long. The engineering license to actually build is simpler to get, quicker to get, and then the operating license at the end is more of a formality.
Thank you. And then switching over to geology, can you kind of touch on what makes this PaleoPlacer deposit so unique relative to some of the other deposit types?
I mean, really, it's the lack of complication. I mean, when I've worked on Pine-Catter and Immaculata, you're looking at these low sulfidation epithermal systems, which are fantastic, but they're quite complicated to chase, quite complicated to understand. This one is, it's once you understand the morphology of the fan, it becomes very simple. So you're just drilling downstream or a long strike. And then the really unique feature of it is that winnowing that's happened, that filtering that's happened from a primary gold deposit to just having sand and gold left. So we have no sulfides, we have nothing else. It is really quartzite with very fine gold grades in it. The other one that's a little interesting for us is we have no oxidation, we have no laterite or anything. So it's hard rock from surface. And of course, we always get confused with the oxide sulfide terminology because there is no sulfide. It's just hard rock. So it's fresh rock, but with no sulfides. So it works really well for us. It allows us to have good pit walls and be environmentally as friendly and benign as possible.
Thank you. And then one more question before you carry on. It's actually about this slide. So kind of looking at the timeline, with the PFS completed and, permitting the focus of this year, are you looking to do a feasibility study once permits are in place, and kind of what's the time frame for that?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of work to prepare for the feasibility study now. We would want to be starting infill drilling this year, if possible, and then have it completed maybe by the end of next year is what the timing we're looking at, which will be sort of in line with where we'd need to be.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I'll carry on. So as I said, here, the pre-feasibility study we completed was it November 2021. Highlights of it shown here. Again, we have 1.4 million ounces of reserves. Produces an average of 120,000 ounces a year, but really importantly, I think it's that first 6 years really drives it from what we call phase one, where we're getting about 150,000 ounces a year at much higher grade. And that's an area we'll focus on. I'll touch on a bit later on as well. Initial capital, 260 million and generating a post-tax NPV of 320 million. So it's, again, really pretty straightforward. The numbers look good. I think they'll continue to look good as we move through various parts in the cycle in the gold mining industry with, relating to costs and to metal prices. The margins will stay there and stay good. So, this is going to be a mine that gets into production, stays in production, and hopefully well beyond the life that we're even projecting here. Just to look at some sensitivities, these are always, it's just good to see what sort of leverage there is to the gold price. We ran them the study at $1,550 an ounce. You can see it up there up to 2,000, but obviously down to 1,200. Even then, it's still making a reasonable return, which is nice to know. And this is where I sort of just said, this will be a mine that gets going, stays going, keeps making money, and hopefully keeps going even longer because it'll go through cycles of the mining gold price. And if gold does dip, this thing will stay in production, keep making money, and be there for when the gold is high to really reap the profits. Just the layout of it. I said that we have two phases. Phase one is the economic heart of the deposit. This is what we call Esperanza South, which is right in the middle of this map here. So it's open pits, shallow open pits, generally down to about 100, 120 meters, which these days is a very shallow open pit. Waste dumps, traditional tailings dam, CIP processing facility, and a 28-kilometre power line. The 28K power line and the associated road out to the highway are the only real infrastructure add-ons we have, which makes this a fantastic location for building a mine. I mean, everywhere else I've worked, you've had hundreds of kilometres of power lines or roads or difficult airfields or highways to move in Nevada. This one, it's just simple. So it's a really good location. And again, it's a little hard. You can see a bit in this satellite image there. It's farming country. There's cattle grazing going on here, so we're not doing damage to a pristine environment. Humans have been in this area for 40, 50 years now and have had their impact already. The process is going to be a CIP, just whole ore agitation leaching, and feed grades in phase one are 1.3 grams a tonne, which is what drives that economic heart, and it drops to about 0.8 of a gram in phase two. Mineral reserves and resources, I mentioned a couple of times we've got the 1.4 million ounces, but here you can actually see that, Esperanza South has that 1.3, East and Centre have the lower grades. And that doesn't mean there isn't higher grade there. It's still a lot of drilling, a lot of work to do to see if we can find more high grade in those areas. But, right now this is the way it is. And, and the mineral resources here as well. You just see Esperanza South is significantly higher grade than the other areas. So initially, we'll be looking for more growth around Esperanza South, but there is still a lot of work to do in the other areas as well. Any other questions at that point?
We might have a few more while we're on this slide before you carry on. So looking at the mining plan, it's quite clear there's two phases, and phase one is higher grade. So what exactly drives that higher production in that first years of mine life? It's
really driven by the grade. The grade is 1.3 in that area, and as I said, it could be that we haven't found the higher grade channels in the east and the centre yet. There are a lot less drilling in those areas. There's a lot less definition of the alluvial fan in those areas, especially in the east, because in the east we do have some quite high grade hits, but then we low grade around it. It's a little harder to tie together. But really south, it's just very continuous in those grade zones. And so that'll be the area we look to expand.
Thank you. And we have some technical questions from the audience. How is price inflation impacting the project?
I mean, the impact it has on us in real dollar terms today, impacting the company, is the cost of drilling. We're seeing drilling costs in Brazil going up a lot. So that's obviously, as we plan our feasibility infill drilling, that's an issue we're looking at. Obviously, we haven't done a new cost estimation on the pre-feasibility study that was, now a year and a half, year and a quarter old. There's going to be inflation on those numbers for sure. As to how much it's a little hard to judge. But we did have a mine fleet in there, owner-operated mine fleet. So I think there's a very good chance we'll be able to pull that out and go to contract mining. So we'll be able to offset some of the CapEx requirements that way. But yeah, there's going to be some escalation for sure, but I think you're only talking 12 to 18 months of the inflation that we're seeing. It's not like we've got 3, 4, 5 years of it. It's only the last 12 to 18 months.
Thank you. And then kind of leading into the feasibility study, at what stage is the feasibility percent completed? So I think it's asking about the percentage of
complete. Yeah, pre-feasible. The full feasibility study hasn't started yet, so it's at a very very clear 0% right now. We are currently defining our drill program for the infill drilling, so we can work out exactly how many meters of drilling we're going to need. We'll obviously work out what that's going to cost us. How we're going to do that and when we start. So
Thank you. And then one more, has the carbon footprint been calculated? That's another audience question.
It hasn't yet. No. It's something when we do the feasibility study and we're certain, more certainty on the equipment that's going to be used, we will definitely look at it. Obviously for now, as a development project, we have, 3 or 4 4-wheel drives driving around, and that's all. But we do a lot of revegetation, so we're probably negative on our impact. I think because we do more revegetation than damage out there currently. But obviously, in the future, we would need to look at that more seriously, in a different way.
Okay, thank you. And we do have one more going back to permitting, and this might be a good spot. What would be the main topics in public hearing? How are you affecting the closest town? And what are some potential risks that can delay the EIA process?
Yeah, it's a good question. We were, when we started doing all of our work internally, we figured the dam was going to be the biggest topic. And now we've got a team on the ground doing, interacting with all of the local the local actors, the people who are going to be talking to, the people in the local community, the local authorities, the local educational systems. The dam doesn't seem to be the biggest issue. It does still seem to be employment. It does seem to be how our project ties in with Lula's government's plans to develop the region. There's been a change in politics in Brazil, with Lula coming in and saying he wants a environmentally friendly green mining industry doing things properly, and he's really anti the illegal miners going into the indigenous areas, going into the pristine jungle areas, and he's going to come down really hard on them. But the challenge he has before him is if he comes down hard on those illegal miners, it's a losing battle unless you give them employment somewhere else. So he sort of, so I think we're positioning ourselves when we speak to people in the community, because people in the community around us do, a portion of them, are involved in that illegal mining in different regions. That's their concern, where's our food going to come from if we can't do the mining anymore? So the employment is an issue for everybody. And then general interest. But the good thing is everyone in the area understands mining already. So we're not teaching them about mining and the impacts of it. We're teaching them about doing it properly.
Thank you. And then we might have one more before we move on. So comparing the pre-feas to the feasibility study, are you expecting any changes to like the mine size or process route or any major specs there?
No, not at all at this point. We would anticipate it being very similar. There are certain areas of optimization that we can look at, and we will. When we do the pre-feas, you keep everything as simple and as straightforward as you can. Getting into the feasibility study and closer to operations, we will look at some more optimization features, maybe some ore sorting, there's certain aspects there we might be able to do. We might be able to play around with grind size a little bit. It'll be operational tweaks more than whole scale changes.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. So on that, and obviously almost on that last question, we will say Tarkwa is the closest analogous mine to this. Geologically, Jacobina is very similar, but it's a very steep deposit, so it's an underground mine more than open pit. Tarkwa even has the same dip as us, so the open pit mining there is a great model for us to learn from, and very handy that Marcus was there in developing their mining model, mine plans and mining techniques. But just to show you what that is, Tarkwa, that's a PaleoPlacer mine just like ours. If you look at the head grade, 1.2 grams a tonne in 2021, very similar to ours. Plant recovery, 97%, very similar to what we're saying. Obviously, they're much bigger than us. They're looking at 500,000 ounces a year. We're looking at 150,000 ounces, and that's probably why we get slightly better selectivity, and we hopefully keep that recovery slightly higher. But there's so much to learn from this mine, and now having Marcus, we have that ingrained knowledge. So it's very handy. People ask about how we mine a dipping reef through the pit floor. It's just a little model on how that works. And again, this is what's achieved and what's done and what's planned at Tarkwa, so it's not something we're making up from scratch. It just shows, you can get pretty close to the top and the bottom of the reef, stop getting any dilution and maintain your grades high, maintain your operating efficiencies through the process plant. And again, Marcus was part of developing this plan for them, and they get within 30 centimetres on the top, 20 centimetres on the footwall. If we can get even that or even slightly better because we're using smaller equipment, it's going to be a very successful mine. Just with the last sort of technical slides, you can see Esperanza South here in the sort of bottom right center, Esperanza Center above and Esperanza East. The red dots here are drill holes that geologists, geos want to drill to expand their deposits. As you can see, there's a lot of areas they still want to drill on expansion. Just as a board, we made a decision that, expanding further from, growing our resources another 500,000 ounces or whatever, or even 1 million ounces wouldn't have a great deal of difference at this point. We wanted to stop doing that drilling and move forward to production, really, get permits in place and get it in production. And then we can do this drilling, because if we've got 10 years mine life, there's not really much point spending $1 million or $2 million on drilling now for something that might happen in 11, 12, 13 years. So there is still a lot of upside potential here, even beyond this. I mean, this doesn't count anything. This is only chasing the shallow surface mineralization still. The deeper stuff is still untapped, and there's a lot of potential there. So again, I think this is a deposit which is going to be around for a long time. Geologists for the next 10, 15, 20 years hopefully are still learning a lot about it, and we'll still finding new reefs, new extensions, even new styles of mineralization here. And then just lastly, what is TriStar? It's our capital structure. We have about 6.5 million Canadian, just under 5 million US in cash in the bank right now. So we have plenty of money to complete our permitting as required, complete the year, do the work we need to do. And that's sort of going pretty well. We will opportunistically look at new sources of funding to accelerate the feasibility study and complete the feasibility study, but we can get it going, get started with the money we have now. We've got quite a lot of options in front of us as to how and when we do all of that work. What else? That's really it in there, yeah. And that was the last slide. If I have any more questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Sure. Yeah, I've got a couple. Nick, if you don't mind going back to the exploration stuff, what percentage of the property has been drilled to date, and what do you consider the upside for the project to look like?
I mean, it's how we always talk about 19 kilometers of the main reef outcropping. We've probably drilled 8 to 10 of that now, so there's a lot more of that to do. And then you've got hidden reefs and you've got blind reefs underneath them, and new targets that are teasing us around the whole property. So I would say we've got less than 25% of the exploration done that we would want to do on this. I mean, if we were a big, massive company with a bottomless, bank account, we would just be peppering this thing and drilling out all of these targets. And so I think we've barely scratched it. Maybe 20-25% of the exploration is done. There's a lot more to find, a lot more work to do, and potential to uncover.
And how do the PaleoPlacer reefs outcrop relative to the host rock? Is it as edges of the bowl of metamorphosed sediments? Yeah,
the reefs, because they're the most porous part of the sedimentary pack originally, they do become the most silicified, the hardest rock once it becomes metamorphosed. So they generally form the high points around the plateau, as the question suggests, sort of the rim of the plateau in many places. So it's generally the high points from what we found so far. Going back to the Tarkwa model, speaking to geologists, explorationists who worked there, that started in a very similar way. And then they did also find blind reefs and that didn't act in the same way, but still carried gold. So we're still looking at the easy stuff that was sticking out as the high points, as the easiest thing to find. But in general, that's it. And now those reefs have all got info workings, a couple of meters deep, but goes for 6, 7, 8 kilometers long,
And where do you see the best near-term opportunities that could add to the current mine plan?
Around Esperanza South. If we can extend that phase 1 grade at, mining at 1.3 grams a ton for a couple of years, that has a massive impact on the economics of the project. So as we have it now, without talking about a completely new discovery on site, which is possible. But from what we know now, the easiest growth would be around Esperanza South. The least developed area with the most work needed on it right now is Esperanza East. As I indicated earlier, there's some good grades there, but just so little drilling in it that we haven't got enough drill holes to join the dots together yet.
Okay, and then looking at your corporate structure, who are your major shareholders, and how have you financed the company to date?
To date, mainly through equity raises, obviously with Royal Gold. They bought a 1.5% NSR from us for $8 million US. Biggest shareholders are Oromet, who came in last year, bought 9.9% of the company. US Global have been a long-term supporter. They probably, I haven't seen recently, but they're probably over 10%, 13% still. And Gold 2000 down at Zurich have been a long-time supporter, have around 10% as well. RBC, Global Asset Management, have been a good supporter as well, probably have, I'm not sure exactly, 5% of us. So they're the big ones.
And do you have any Brazilian shareholders or supporters in country?
I'd say we have supporters in country. We obviously have a Brazilian director in Carlos Verlenha, who's probably one of the preeminent mining lawyers in the country. But we don't have any funds or big investors out of Brazil. Something we would like to fix. We'd love to fix it. It'd be nice to have, local Brazilian money supporting the project and getting benefit from it. We always talk about it as a company that we want to make sure that the local community near the mine gets the most benefit from it rather than a central federal government. We're working on that. It'd be really nice if we could do the same on the investor base, make sure that there are investors in Brazil who make money on this as well as Toronto and London and Zurich.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly helps with the permitting process.
Yeah.
And then one last question for you, Nick. Could you discuss the outlook for M&A? With the beefing up of the operating team, it sounds like a liquidity event is not on the horizon. In your opinion, what needs to happen for bidders to show up? Is it size, permits?
I think permits are a big deal. From what I've seen of the M&A activity and the people I know in that area, they're very, very risk averse these days. I think from a lot of acquisitions that took place maybe 10 years ago, it didn't work out so well, and a lot of the CEOs aren't around anymore. So the current executives are a lot more cautious and a lot more risk averse. So getting permits and showing that it's a clean, sustainable, viable mine, it's permitted and it's not going to do any damage and it's not going to attract negative news attention on negative social media. I think those are the biggest issues. So we're not expecting anything right now. Our eyes are on getting this permits, getting that feasibility study, and then building up the team under Marcus to build it and to operate it as needed. But if someone comes along in the meantime, we'll always be talking to them and looking for the best possible option for our shareholders. It's nice to have that. We can do it ourselves as a base case. If someone offers us something above that line, then they get serious attention.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly seems like we're in an M&A market. I haven't seen anything in Brazil recently, except for that rumor of Tesla and Sigma Lithium, which seems to not have come to fruition this week. But I would think we were discussing last week where your multiple is versus your peer group. I mean, the advanced developers have been probably the hardest hit in the market, I think, about all the gold companies. But despite that, you're still trading at a massive discount to your peer groups. Does that make you feel vulnerable from an M&A perspective?
It does, because I think at this point, normally, I've always had a strong belief that whoever's going to run and operate the mine should have a say in the feasibility study, because that sort of sets a lot of things in stone. And yet, with our share price where it is, we're not really that interested in talking to people because we want to take it further, unlock more of that value, and get recognition for the value that's there ourselves first. It would be, that's really our aim right now, is to, we know what we can do, we know what's under our control. The project is going great, the team are working great. We've just now got to get this message out there and say, look, you're going to have a multi-million ounce deposit with a permit in a great location, in a jurisdiction that's pro-mining, with a community that wants it, needs the employment. It's environmentally clean. It's helping Brazil solve a serious problem. It ticks every box, and we just got to get that message out to the world now.
Well, I think that's a great summary of the value proposition. Was there anything you wanted to discuss today that we didn't get a chance to cover?
No, I think that's really it. I mean, it's the permitting is our focus. The team are doing a great job. The authorities are responding really well to us, which is really nice. And that's really the message right now, is that's what's coming, and and it's going to be. It puts us into. I think it just puts us into a rare space when we have globally, 1.8 million ounces indicated and an additional inferred on top of that, with a permit in such a good location. There just aren't many assets around like that, So I think this puts us in a rare space.
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't have any additional questions, Magda.
No, I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Nick. Thanks to all the audience participants. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out, or if you'd like a one-on-one call, by all means, reach out and we'll set that up for you. Yeah, thanks so much for your time and looking forward to an exciting year for TriStar.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.